Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. أشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. حي على الصلاة، حي على الصلاة، حي على الفلاح، حي على الفلاح. الله أكبر، الله أكبر، لا إله إلا الله. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا رسول الله. Brothers and sisters, before getting into the theme of the Khutbah today, I ask, as I asked before beginning of every Khutbah, that we remember our brothers and sisters throughout this Ummah of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, suffering, whether we know the cause of that suffering or not. And one area of this Ummah that we all know what is going on in the suffering, and maybe not understand the degree of the suffering that's going on in Gaza at this particular time, and also developing in the West Bank. That let us please remember our brothers and sisters who just today, after over 2 months, the United Nations decided today that this Security Council got together and said, okay, we won't call for the condemnation of the genocide that's going on. We won't even call for a permanent ceasefire. We'll just say now you are allowed, and we will increase by $130 million or so. We will increase humanitarian aid. And without saying it, what they're saying is that we will allow this aid to go to the people that the Zionists have not killed yet. And then after, and if this aid gets to the people in time, before they starve to death or disease cause them to die as a result of the unsanitary conditions that have been created in Gaza. Now, if everyone's not dead, we'll take those supplies, this humanitarian aid that has been stopped at the border at Rafah and stopped at other ports and being allowed to come in to the people. So if anyone's still alive after this and they're not dying from disease or starvation, then we will allow the bombing, the missiles, the drone attacks to begin again. Brothers and sisters, in all of my years, conscious years as a human being, I've never in my lifetime been able to see something, this kind of genocide. And the world continues to watch. But there's no reason, there's no excuse for us, not every single day of our lives, that we must make dua for the people of Philistine. That you and I have to talk about. Don't be afraid to talk about what's going on in Gaza. It is an open genocide that almost the entire planet condemn what's going on. But by the same token, we can't get a permanent ceasefire and allow those babies, those children, those women, those elderly men and women and others who are still alive after all of this bombardment for 2 months, that if we can't get a ceasefire to allow those who are still alive to get the nourishment, to get the kind of protection that they need. Brothers and sisters, the times that we are living in now are not just a test for those who are victims of boom, oppression, like the brothers and sisters and the babies in Palestine. It's a test for you and I as well. What are we going to do? Are we minimally going to make dua for our brothers and sisters that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala stop this suffering and call to tax those who are responsible for this kind of devastation of human beings? Brothers and sisters, I want to just take just a few moments of your time today to discuss a little about the history of Islam and what was going on at the time that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala brought the enlightenment of the revelation of the Quran and the raising of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu. What was going on at that particular time? Brothers and sisters, you and I know when we study the history of the revelation of the Quran, when we study the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu, we can't help but come to the conclusion that what was going on at the time of the revelation of the Quran was one of the darkest periods in human history up to that particular time. We have the story of the Persian Salman al-Farsi. You know his story better than I. That Salman al-Farsi's father was the keeper of the flame. Those who attributed so much to a fire, this Zoroastrian, that they treated it like it was something sacred. And honor amongst the people was to be the keeper of the flame. Salman al-Farsi's father had this distinction in Persia. Salman al-Farsi's father designated to Salman when he became of age that you be responsible. I'm ultimately responsible. But I want you to make sure that the fire doesn't go out. You know the story about Salman. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put something in Salman's heart to know that even though I'm right here with the leader of these fire worshipers, that's my dad, but there's something wrong with what I'm doing. There's something wrong with what they believe. So you know how Salman, when he was assigned a task, he ran across a Christian monk and he began to question this monk. I hear people tell me that you're a religious person, that you try to worship God. Tell me about your faith. And Salman would go that way every day. He would listen to this Christian monk. And then when the old man was about to die, Salman asked him, he said, who is it that I can go to who can continue the lessons that you give me? Because the man told him that I don't think I'm going to be on earth long. And he said, go to this particular monk. When you read the Islamic literature, many of the scholars and the historians of Islam say that Salman didn't just go around the corner seeking true guidance, but he went into another country and he had the same experience, another territory, and he had the same experience with another monk. Who is it that can teach me after you go? And he said, go to this guy. And Salman went there. He did this on 4 different occasions. And when he got to that last monk, this is before the revelation of the Quran, the beginning of the prophetic mission of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. When he got to that 4th monk, this monk said, I hate to tell you this, Salman, but there's no one on earth who is teaching what I'm teaching, who believes as I believe. I can't send you in good conscience to another monk because there's no one else who is worshiping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way that I'm teaching you. But then the monk said, okay, Salman, I'll tell you this. There's a town over there in Arabia called Yathrib. Go to Yathrib because a prophet is coming very soon. If you hurry, you may be there when our Lord raises this final prophet, raises this prophet. Salman, and I'm sorry to get so long into the story, Salman started making it to Yathrib. He got caught out in the desert by himself. And these Jewish men took him and captured him and treated him and had him become a slave in their midst. But as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have it, where they were going was to Yathrib, later to become Medina. The story goes on to tell us, and this is in the authentic history, that when Salman was doing his labor for the day, he was pruning dates up in a tree in Yathrib, and he heard his so-called master and another one saying, we hear that a prophet is going to come, that he's going to come soon, and he's going to come to Medina. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have it, you know the rest of the story, that Salman, when being in the presence and hearing the message of Islam, immediately embraced this deen. Brothers and sisters, I say all of this to say that at the time of the revelation of the Quran, as far as that fourth month knew, there was no one on earth who was professing, worshiping one God, not a single group of people. And maybe there were, and I take that back, there were individuals like we have in Mecca, that there were individuals who were believing in the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam. There was no organized effort anywhere at that time to teach the people La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this Quran to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and you know the history, that we know that there was the Persian Empire at that time. And that first movement of Islam under the leadership of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, they were surrounded by the Persians. They were surrounded by the eastern part of the Byzantine, what was left of the Roman Empire. And then to the south, they had the Abyssinian Christian government there, empire there in North Africa. Brothers and sisters, this was one of the darkest periods in human history up to this particular time. Because, as I've mentioned, there were individuals who were believing and worshiping one God, but there was no movement to spread this message of La ilaha illallah amongst the people. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam for the guidance of mankind, again, it was a very dark period in human history. I don't have time to get into any specifics, but this was one of the darkest periods in human history at that particular time. So, brothers and sisters, with the message of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised not just an individual prophet to call to the people, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala raised a group of men, women, and children to carry this message of submission to the world. That now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was reaching into one of the most illiterate area perhaps on the face of the earth at that time. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was raising the light of Islam amongst these illiterate people. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was giving strength and a kind of productivity that those in Arabia, there was no record that they'd ever had anything like what was to develop under the leadership of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so, as this message, as you know better than I, as this message of submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala began to spread amongst the people, the theme, the overriding theme, was that of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, calling people not to individual leaders, calling people to accept Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the way that this prophet was commanding that we recognize who Allah is. He's not, as these Christians are saying, that he's one of three, that God is divided into three, that he's not, as others are saying. And so this absolute attachment to Allah is what we today we call this ta'alluq billah. But this is for individuals having this attachment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, attachment to this total religion. But it starts with our attachment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam an ayah that captured what human beings should be about on this earth, what had been lost throughout the centuries, what had been lost amongst the generations of people. And this ayah is an ayah that we find in Surah Al-An'am. And it reads, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, قُلْ إِنَّ صَلَاتِي وَنُسُكِي وَمَحْيَايَ وَمَمَاتِي لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ. That verily my salat, my sacrifice, my living and my dying are for Allah, the Lord of mankind, the Lord of all the worlds. That this is the mantra, this is the mentality that all of us who say we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the last day, that our mentality, in order to achieve individually and collectively, our mentality has to be that of everything that I do on this earth is for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that there is nothing that I can sacrifice for, nothing that I can do, no action that I can take that's not for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There is a hadith where the Prophet Muhammad went on in a couple of very short hadiths help us understand how this manifests in our day-to-day life. The Prophet it said that the fear in law that is was the fear of Allah in all matters, open and secret, and also to rely on the might of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rather than one's own resources. I want to just quickly give an example of how this translates into actual life. You and I know, as much as Muslims today, as much as so many Muslims today are afraid to even say the word jihad, to even acknowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this thing called jihad. It's not just warring on people, that the Prophet ﷺ made it clear that the greatest jihad is that which we do to correct ourselves, to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have us do. But there is a time, there is a place when Muslims must physically fight against those who are suppressing Islam and oppressing the earth. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave this ummah one of the greatest fighters and generals that the world has ever seen in Khalid ibn Walid. That this was a brother, when we look at his history, before Islam, he joined the Muslims at a later stage. But before Islam, when he was fighting against other tribes and fighting against the Muslims, Khalid ibn Walid never lost a battle. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewarded him with this faith, he never lost a battle as the general over the Muslim forces. And we look at this example of Khalid and say that what he was doing was something that was a necessary ingredient in order to protect and to spread this thing of high. And so let me give just a couple of quick examples. The Khalid was referred to by the Prophet Muhammad as the sacred law. He's the sword of Allah. And in the history, it talks about many of the people that Khalid was confronting in battle. They felt that when they heard about this man, Khalid, and his amazing accomplishments, that he must actually have a sword that was given to him by God. And so Khalid explained in a moment of non-combat that no, don't believe that. This is a name that the Prophet Muhammad gave me, that I am the sword. of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that will protect and defend and promote Islam without any fear, without any hesitation. And one story about this belief in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Khalid ibn Walid. There's a story that you find in Tabari, and a number of different Islamic scholars repeat the same story. That once that Khalid was about, and the Muslims were about to fight those on the enemy side. And before this fight, they were saying to Khalid, asking him, a man came up to him and said, look, if you are really who we think you are and who people proclaim, then drink this poison. Drink the poison. If nothing happens to you, then I and all of us will fight you. We'll believe that you're the safe of Allah. You're the sword of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is not recommended to try at home or for any of us to try to demonstrate our faith in drinking the poison. But Khalid took the vow and he drank the poison. And the story goes that people were standing around waiting for him to drop dead, because this was a very deadly poison that would kill people immediately. And as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have it, that Khalid didn't die. Nothing happened to him. When you study the history of Islam, there are more miracles performed on the battlefield in preparation for battles than at any other point. And this was one of the Karama. This is a miracle that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allowed to happen during the time of Khalid ibn Walid. Brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala demands from us not just a shahada, not just a declaration of faith, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala demands from us a commitment to this deen of haq with everything that we have available to us. All praises to Allah, praise Him and seek His assistance against the evils of our minds and against the unsuccessfulness of our actions. Whosoever Allah guides, no one can stray, and whosoever Allah calls to task as a result of his own wrong actions, no one can lead the right. For Allah, help those who help the religion of hundreds of Rasul and countless amongst them. For Allah, disappoint those who try to disgrace the religion of hundreds of Rasul and do not make us those. Brothers and sisters, in times in which we are living today, it's very common and it's understandable that we can hear so many conversations amongst the Muslims about what is going on, that what is happening today is a sign of Qiyamah. It's a sign that we're in the maybe literal last days of human beings. But I just want to remind myself and remind you that the Prophet Muhammad said that in his lifetime, that he was seeing signs of the last day when he was alive over 1,400 years ago. At that particular time, the Prophet Muhammad had said that if, and I'm just paraphrasing, that if we could put this length and time of the world and the life of the world on a clock, that it was at Salat al-Asr at this particular time. So he's saying 1,400 years ago that he's seeing signs of the last day. And that it was not just like we were just getting into a phase leading up to Qiyamah, that it is a process. And so I have to remind myself and remind you, don't sit around waiting for Kiyama, for Isa salam, to appear, to descend from the skies and think that it's no need for me to do everything I can to advance this cause of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, all I need to do is just prepare for the last days. Part of the preparation for the last days are for each and every one of us individually and collectively to have the kind of attachment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that just saying that we're Muslim, just saying that I've taken Shahada is not enough. And it's going to take more than just saying that I am a Muslim in order for us to keep our eyes on the prize. It's an interesting phenomenon. But everything you and I do, we have to keep in mind that it's preparation for the after. It's preparation for the hereafter. I'm doing this because I'm consciously aware that I must do whatever I humanly can to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to try to advance this deen of haq, to try to take a stand whenever and however we're able to against those who are trying to suppress and disgrace and humiliate the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So don't just think because of this slaughter that we're witnessing every day in Gaza and now in the West Bank. Don't think necessarily that this is the biggest sign that's happening at the third holiest mosque in all area of all of Islam, the land of the prophets, the land of the birth of Isa ibn Maryam, alayhi salam. That this kind of desecration is happening there. Don't think, because no one knows when this last day is going to come. What it should be for you and I is an opportunity to try to reinforce our closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Make sure that when we're raised on Yom Kippur, and when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reminds us of this time that we're living in right here today, we're not going to be questioned about those who've come before us, except with the exception that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks about the ummah of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam bearing witness that Prophet Nuh alayhi salam gave the message of God and the law to the people that he was with for 950 years, when his people on Judgment Day would say, no, he didn't say nothing to us about you. And Allah would say, well, who can be a witness? And the witnesses would be the Prophet Muhammad and the Muslims. With that particular exception, we are not responsible for those who come before us, or those who will come after us, or the conditions that we live, that others have lived in. We are responsible, and we're going to be raised and questioned about what did you do? What did I do? Living in the times in which we live, what did we do to try to raise high the banner of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to try to call the people to account for what they're doing, which is clearly against the will and the commands of Allah. We can't think that there's no need, that it's a hopeless situation in any place in the world at any time. And so therefore, I'll just concern myself about planting trees. Excuse me, these are good things that we should do. But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as He has given us the opportunity to take a stand against boom, against oppression, has commanded us to take a stand, I humbly believe that on Qiyamah, when we're asked individually about what did we do, When you saw all of this going on, what did you do? When you read about it, you saw it on TV, when you saw it on YouTube, what did you do? Was there anything that you did in a small way to try to bring an end to the major boom, the major insult that we are facing today in the world? Brothers and sisters, in closing, each and every one Muslim, every one believer, all of us have the opportunity to make Jannah. It's a wonderful thing. It depends on the choices and decisions that we make in life when we're young, when we get middle age, and when we get older. That every one of us have this opportunity to get this eternal reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala based on the actions and the decisions that we make in this world. And those who Allah has gifted with scholarship, they will have their reward. Those whom Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has gifted, like Khalid ibn Walid, gifted with the physical capacity and knowledge to defend this ummah, they'll be given their reward. The martyrs will be given their reward. The everyday person, like we look into the seerah, the woman cleaning up the Masjid al-Nabi, and when she died, the Prophet Muhammad was upset. Nobody told her. She was so humble, such a humble, in the eyes of many people, insignificant person. And the Prophet Muhammad he asked about her and said, well, she died. And he was upset. Why didn't you tell me that she died? This is a believer. This is a believing woman. He went to her grave and performed janazah over this seemingly insignificant person's grave. And so each and every one of us have an opportunity to do something. It could be small, but let's do it, and it's good. Do it consistently with the understanding in our eye on the hereafter that I'm doing this so that I could be one out of the 1,000 people that the Prophet Muhammad said will make it to Jannah. You hear that? 999 people that were created and placed on this earth. 999 out of 1,000 are going to Jahannam, going to the fire. And so let's keep our eye on the hereafter. Let's let our daily actions, the actions that we are consciously thinking, oh Allah, no matter how small this is, I don't have money to give. I don't have certain knowledge to share with others. But whatever I have, I'm doing it peaceably, Lord. Any sacrifice that I've made, I'm doing it for the pleasure, your pleasure, Allah. Oh Allah, give us the knowledge that is useful for us in this world and in the next. Oh Allah, strengthen our connection to you, our attachment to you. To guide our hearts to always be in submission to the will. And oh Allah, make not this ummah of the Prophet Muhammad an object of test for the disbelieving people. And the brothers and sisters have quick announcements. The first ask